Hey everyone, welcome back. Let's tackle some sourdough. Since we're looking at bread, your ingredients list is going to be real small. Here we're looking at 350 grams of bread flour, some room temperature water, 8 grams of salt, and about 200 grams of sourdough starter. If you don't have a starter yet, you can check out this video on how to do it yourself. I'm going to start this with some aeration. This is an aerobic culture. The amount of starter you use is going to depend on the fermentation you're looking for. In this video, we're doing a half room temperature countertop ferment, followed by a half fridge temperature ferment. So I'm going for about 200 grams of starter. Some of the more upper level recipes out there do not start with the starter. They'll have you mix together the dough without any cultures first. It's called an autolyse. We're gonna skip that and just go for a simpler loaf. It still turns out fantastic. To your measured out starter, you're going to add your 350 grams of bread flour and follow this with 8 grams of salt. It's difficult to tell you exactly how much water you're going to need. Every flour is different, every starter is different, your mileage may vary. In this case, I added about 160 grams, which turned out to be too much. Fortunately, there's a really easy way to fix this. Just add more flour or water until you get a consistency about what you see here. It shouldn't be too sticky, it shouldn't be sticking to your hands, but it also shouldn't be too firm. Something in between. This is something you learn how to do the more you make bread. Your loaf is definitely not going to turn out poorly if you add too much water or too much flour. It just might turn out different than from what you expect. Loaves with a lot of water tend to have really big air pockets and come out quite chewy, whereas those with less water have a tighter crumb and are a bit more fluffy. Here you can see the consistency of my dough. Next step is just to let your dough grow and rest and develop for the next 12 hours. Hours later, the sun is up and the dough has really grown. From this point, I popped it in the fridge and let it develop for another maybe 8 hours. This next step is the one that I and many other first-time bakers find pretty challenging. This is shaping, a critical part of bread making. So start by flouring your countertop. Scrape your dough out on top, and don't worry too much about knocking out any air bubbles. We're going to let this ferment again, and it will reinflate. Now, one important rule to follow here is the rounder you shape your dough, the rounder your loaf is going to come out. There's a few tricks to this. One involves turning the dough underneath of the ball, as you can see I'm doing here. The other involves cupping your hands around the dough and moving it in a circular motion. This is one case where having a sticky bottom is actually beneficial. It'll stick to the counter more, and it'll make a nice round shape. This gets easier with practice. Don't worry if it's not working too well for you. Even ugly loaves taste great. I've seen many a loaf get ruined by sticking to the counter. The wetter the dough, the more it's going to stick and lose its shape when you try to move it to the oven later. I use cornmeal here. This really helps prevent that sticking from getting too bad. From here, we're going to cover it and let it prove or grow. I use a bowl. You can also use a floured towel. We're going to let it approximately double in size. This could take 1 hour, it could take 3. It depends on your culture and the temperature of the room. The key to a really good loaf of bread is a very hot oven and a Dutch oven. I've set the temperature as high as it will go, about 500 degrees Fahrenheit, and I've let my Dutch oven heat up for at least half an hour at high temperature. Now, just before your loaf goes in the oven, you're going to slash it. This is a critical step. If you don't do this, your loaf will not expand nearly as much as it could. Slashing also makes your bread look a lot prettier when it's done. I baked this loaf at 500 Fahrenheit for half an hour in the Dutch oven with the lid on. After half hour, I took the lid off and let it bake for an additional 15 minutes. So why do we use a Dutch oven? This is why. Nothing else is going to give you a crust quite like this. If you're unsure whether your loaf is done, hit it a few times on the bottom. If it sounds hollow, it should be fine. And that's sourdough. I hope you didn't find it too difficult. In fact, if you try it once, don't worry, you're going to try it again and again because you're going to fall in love with bread. It happens to everyone. It's one of the best addictions you could possibly have. Thanks for watching.